So the point of Lunch on the Way is to have conversations as we follow Jesus, and for the three of us, as we're in ministry, open and honest conversations. And usually by the end of a conversation, if we're really exploring something that we're not quite sure how to articulate, we typically feel like we shouldn't publish the episode. But that actually defeats the point of the whole conversation, is just to be open and honest and to go through a process of, I guess, revelation and discovery in what God has said, but also in what we sense that God is speaking to us about. This episode talks about a bunch of different things, and yes, there's a big announcement at the very beginning, so clickbaity for that. But also, we jump around a bunch, and I'm sure we want to qualify a lot of what we have to say, but we don't. And we're probably going to talk about what we say in this episode in future episodes as well. So thanks for listening to Lunch on the Way, and here is the episode. Kia ora koutou, welcome to Lunch on the Way. I'm Joey, joined by Jonathan and Graeme. It's been a while since we've been in the exact same room together.
It's always better.
It's always better.
Yeah, it is.
I can actually see the wrinkles.
How's it feeling?
Thanks, mate. I was thinking about you. You're going Grey Fox, mate. It's awesome.
It's happening. It's
flicks
happening
of
too
you,
fast.
and
Yeah, I know. Look at us, man.
I know. I'm actually more gray, I think, in some areas of my hair than you are.
That's
And
crazy.
you're a decade older than me.
Yeah, oh yeah.
No, you're 15 years older than me.
Let me just say that the grey is the grey comes, and then it's when you start looking at me and you're going, gee, that skin's looking kind of, it's not tight anymore. It's sort of a bit loose.
I know. I had the thought today under my... okay, this is not a body negativity podcast, all right? We're not going to get into that. Never mind. I'm not going to tell you about all the reasons why I feel like I needed to get in better shape. But here we go. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, and don't forget to...
like and subscribe on YouTube.
And if you're listening to this on audio, don't forget to follow and rate.
We really appreciate your listening. So, I don't know what I titled this because we're recording it now, and if you're listening to this, I imagine I would have baited you in some way to say there's a special announcement.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Still sharp upstairs, man. It's good.
Yeah, still sharp
Good.
upstairs, 32 years young, and I'm back in school.
32.
32.
back in school.
Oh, yeah.
I'm back in school.
Tell us your news, man.
Started a PhD program officially October 1st of 2024.
What a smart
Wow.
guy.
No, I think each of you are like, he doesn't know what he's getting himself into. Yeah. So I'm starting a PhD specifically, if you're interested, looking at how churches can discover their foundational metaphor from which their vision, mission, values, and liturgical practices emerge. Because my assumption is that the metaphor is actually what's underneath everything, because that's how we integrate and live into our realities. People don't live into propositional statements on things that they believe necessarily theologically. They live into storied theology. They live into a story, and metaphor is an aspect or a concentration of narrative and story. And what actually emerged from that one conversation was that PhD. If you remember that conversation we had about metaphors.
Yeah.
And I was just
right.
reading. No, I didn't even read it. Graeme just said we should talk about this. I'm like, okay, whatever. Metaphor is boring, blah.
Yeah.
And then I'm like,
That's right.
yeah, we're in the conversation, and I'm like, holy crap.
That's so true.
And then Jonathan, you said, you know what churches should do? They should just look
Man,
at
we're
it.
trouble,
Yeah,
we're
you-
so
you-
trouble.
You know what
Blame
churches
you.
should do? They should look at the metaphors they use, because the metaphors describe what they really believe.
Right,
and I was
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, and I'm seeing the PhD kind of form in my head as we're talking, and I'm looking out there into some literature superficially and realizing that no one in the evangelical space, broadly speaking, is doing stuff like this. It's all still within the aftermath of the businessification of church.
Right.
So you do a vision, a mission, a values,
Yeah.
all those things as a way of aligning towards a particular outcome.
Yep.
Where the metaphor kind of opens up to not be prescriptive about what your mission is, or even prescriptive about what the outcome is. The church itself, from within, discovers who they sense they are through a metaphor.
Right.
And an example, Graeme, can you share the example that you used with the church that you pastored years ago about drops in the water or ripples in a
Oh,
pond?
yeah, no. So we went through this process. Actually, it was a 4-year process, but the last part of the process was, particularly the last part, was about the vision of the church.
That's right.
And so what we did, long and short, went through a discernment process over a year, and I think it was 16 images that emerged, and then we broke that down, and then it came to one last image, which was basically a drop of water became many drops in the water as a ripple on a pond. And so we actually did this enormous mural of that at the front of the church and pointed it with Luke 4:18-19. The Spirit of the Lord is on me.
Wow.
And so what was interesting is because people, and what we began to see was that people would say in their prayers, Lord, help me be a ripple.
Right.
There was no sort of,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of open space because the image is ambiguous.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ambiguity creates space.
Right.
But it
But it was
also,
this idea that
Yeah.
people they picked up that metaphor and started playing.
But you didn't have to ask anybody, oh, what's your place within this? How do you see yourself within the church? It's like, well, this is how I see myself. We all see ourselves as this. You didn't need an articulation of a vision or a mission statement. The image itself actually encapsulated all of that.
Yeah.
And there was one in a class that Graeme had me in for an hour, where this person. Am I allowed to share this, you think? The image?
Yeah.
I'll keep everything else secret.
Yeah, so just to give that a bit of a context, so students have to present an artifact, and the artifact is supposed to be an embodiment of their philosophy of ministry.
Yeah, and this person had put together kind of like a portrait, but it was more gluing images on, and they had woven together a nest from different threads from the different places they had been around the world, and it was placed on a branch, and there were different indigenous birds flowing in and out, and they were kind of this wonky-looking bird outside of the nest a little bit, and it was them trying to describe, I guess, their spiritual reality, but essentially what she was describing was also her ecclesiology through that nest, where the church was the nest, it was placed on a branch, people were flowing in and out, into the church, out to the world, flowing in and out, for nurturing, rest, for wholeness, and then going out as God sent people. And when I saw that image, I was like, oh my goodness, this is essentially my PhD. What I hope churches
Right.
kind of discover is this sense of who they are through the image.
Yeah.
And then I asked the person, I said, so where's the nest placed? And they hadn't considered that. I said, is it placed in a garden? Is it placed on the side of a road? Is it placed in someone's back? Because I was like, oh, that placement of the nest is actually how you view the world,
Yeah.
and how you view yourself in the world. And I'm like, oh, it has enough permission. An image and a metaphor has enough permission to allow everybody to kind of see their place within the image,
Yeah.
and it actually creates a little bit more of a collective understanding of us, of the church.
Yep.
Less individualistic, more invitational, and people don't have to. The big thing in my early days of ministry was you need to share the mission statement or the vision statement every single Sunday in different ways, in the sermon and the
Right.
announcements, whatever,
Yeah.
so people really get it. And I'm like, you don't have to get people to get an image; they've got it.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's in their heart. You don't have to convince them of it.
And it keeps expanding.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the danger, you could argue that there's entropy there. It just expands so far that it all dissipates. But I mean, that's where Scripture holds Scripture in your hand as
Yeah.
well. So, but it does offer that invitation of participation.
Yep.
Because then you engage with the other and say, oh, so what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
And you're doing your theology in around that, I think.
Yeah.
Which it's the word is delightful, joyful, playful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all words that kind of,
Yep.
I mean, for us, if I say those words, they sort of capture my humanity, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be really interested also to hear how you get to that.
Yeah.
Get to the underlying images.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know
metaphors,
how to do that yet.
because
Yeah,
because metaphors are not they're not
No.
the ones that we live from. The ones that we truly live from
Yeah.
are often deeply, deeply
Yeah.
hidden, and that they're so hidden that we don't even
No,
Yeah.
know
that's
that we're
right.
living from them.
Yeah.
So you'll ask someone at church, "What's your metaphor?" and they'll tell you a whole lot of stuff.
They'll tell me
They'll tell you, and they'll probably be able to articulate
Yeah.
it. It won't be the metaphor
it
they
won't
live
be.
from.
Yeah.
So it'll be
Well,
getting to
yeah.
that, and then changing the deep structure of a church's metaphor that they are living from. That's a whole different ballgame
Well,
in
this-
itself as well.
And this is not unrelated to the imaginary that Charles Taylor and
Right,
Walter
yeah.
Anderson talk about,
Yeah.
and others talk about.
yeah,
I mean, I think there is a sort of but it's sort of a little opaque and it's not tight
Uh-huh.
of a congregational imaginary.
Right.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
And but yeah, getting at that.
Well,
yeah, getting at that's really tricky.
I think you're right, Jonathan. And I was reading James K. Smith's his two books, Desiring the Kingdom and Imagining the Kingdom. I'm
Yeah.
kind of reading them in tandem because they kind of go together, Volume 1, Volume 2. And in the Desiring the Kingdom, he articulates a way of formation and way of change that begins with liturgical practices that inform and change our desires of the heart, which then change, I have the image over there, I kind of forget it, which then changes our actions in the world.
Okay.
Or even changes
Right.
our minds and everything
Right.
about us, our soul, spirit, everything. But it begins with liturgical practices. And where he brings in the metaphor bit is that it's actually the images that we have in the background that inform the liturgical practices that we have.
Yep.
And so you have to have them in tandem. And the implicit thing is this is where it gets a bit dangerous. Is should the metaphor be aspirational in the sense of this is who we want to see, so we're creating a counter metaphor to the dominant cultural metaphors,
Right.
or
Yeah.
do you
yeah,
just
good point.
do you lean into what you already have, what's already there? So that's the tension, and
That's a good point.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting. Anyway, so that's what I'm going through over the next 3 years.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's
pray
interesting.
pray for my sanity. I'm trying to figure out still how to work it all with still working pretty intensely overall. I'm optimistic. I'm looking forward to it.
That's so.
There are lots of.
I love it.
There are lots of rabbit holes here, isn't there?
Yeah. mate,
yeah.
There's
it's
lots of little, and they might join up again too. You might
Yeah.
go down one, and they might go down another one. And
Yeah.
I know you know they join up, they might not either.
They might not.
Yeah.
To come out of them again.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
But I'm not sure.
It'll be great. It'll be a good journey, mate. I'm
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
forward to
I'll let
tracking with you.
I'll keep you up to date. If
Yep.
you want to sponsor me, I'm just kidding.
Patreon.
He's not.
Yeah.
He's not.
So today, though, I've got a few things in my mind. I'm not really sure what we want to go with. I feel like we could have just bounced off of the metaphor bit and just gone down a whole other
Yeah.
trail that way. Because I've got other thoughts there. I messaged one to you too in the WhatsApp group chat, and you've got a lot of background on that particular one. I won't say yet in case we go to it because it's a bit too much potentially. I'm actually more inclined to change it up completely now.
Yeah.
All right, as I'm
Yeah.
saying this out loud. So formation. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to say where I was inspired with this thought because I don't want to be critical of people who we might know. We'll leave it at that. So,
That's intriguing, Joey.
yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah,
No,
you
I'm
got me
thinking
good-
about.
you-
Who are you thinking about?
I don't think you'd guess.
Okay.
I don't think you'd figure it out. But basically, I was listening to a conversation that was deeply in the formational space. Of formation is so important that when it comes to everything that we do, we need to be curating spaces of formation, particularly liturgical practices, because if liturgy changes our desires in our heart, and the heart and desire actually aims us in a particular direction of formation, then what really matters is what you do a whole lot more, clearly. But here's where the tension comes in. And I'm talking about this for all of life, from if you're raising kids, teenagers, yourself as an adult, or as you're older in life. We've recognized this shift within evangelical world, which is not new for the majority of Christians, but is new within evangelicalism, of formation as being the dominant conversation within evangelical culture. John Mark Comer, influenced by James K. Smith, John Tyson. These are popular names in the U.S. that people here, even in New Zealand, listen to consistently. And the conversation is all about formation. All about formation, practicing the way, John Mark Comer, all that kind of stuff. What I wonder, and what I'm worried about, and I would love to hear your thoughts on, is are we moving into potentially a new form of legalism and isolationism through formation? Because if you look at the early 20th century and into the middle of the century, Christians were more known for what they didn't do than what they did, what they positioned themselves against as opposed to what they were for. And what mattered was, especially in my background growing up, before I grew up, before I was even alive, is like, well, Christians don't go bowling, they don't smoke, They don't play cards.
They don't bowl?
Bowling was off limits.
Okay, why?
I know. I love bowling.
Why don't you bowl?
No, exactly. But here's the thing. And then we realized they don't drink. That was one of the things as well. And we realized quickly over the late 90s into the 2000s, holy crap, we're creating a bunch of legalistic people who do all the right things but have no spirit and no soul within who they claim to worship. And Christians are falling away, and we're wondering why. They're rebelling, and they're going into worldly things. What's going on? So the answer was, let's just loosen up a little bit. Let's go more to the heart of the thing as opposed to the form. Well, now a shift is taken from a different angle where the form is really important now. The practices, the liturgies, the rhythms, the associations in the world matter because everything you do, whether you know it or not, is forming you into who you are. So what you do really matters. And what I'm worried about is if we're slowly moving into a form of legalism over a generation.
Right.
Through a deep consciousness of, well, I can't do that because it's going to form me incorrectly. Therefore, I might not be able to associate with those people anymore because it will form me incorrectly. I can't go to the mall anymore because it's going to form me incorrectly. I can't go and buy things online, or I can't watch shows on Netflix anymore. You can see how it can just spiral out. Mm-hmm. Have you guys had thoughts on that? Have you guys had thoughts? What's your take around what I've presented?
I mean, didn't Mark say a pick up on this?
Yeah, what did he say? I don't remember.
Well, he's very much embodying that sort of need to adopt spiritual practices, and we've heard that from him. I think it was in one of the morning sessions. I'm pretty sure you were at that.
I was at all of them. I just probably didn't remember what he said.
Yeah, well, but he was saying what he said. Look, they're really important, but I think there's a danger here.
Okay,
of exactly that.
Yeah,
that we, that becomes the thing, which then leads to legalism. So he was, which I was sort of pleased to hear that because we've talked about a little bit. I mean, it reminds me of this sort of idea between form and essence. Like there's something really attractive about Anglican liturgy. But my middle daughter would say, "Oh, Dad, it's boring." Mm-hmm. But she could probably go to something where it's got essence in it, and she'd say it was good. Mm-hmm. So the danger is that we just lean on that. And I know liturgy is important because it can carry us. Yeah. But I mean, the same thing happens in charismatic Pentecostal churches, except we just don't say it. Yeah. But we do have it. So I think that's the tension, isn't it? Sort of like the form can be so emphasised that'll get us there, and there's an element of truth in that. Yeah. But there's a danger of then it just becomes a mechanism. Yep. So it lacks spirit. Yep. Don't know what you...
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. I think I think the heart loves to wander. That we just have hearts that love to wander all over the place, and I think formation and the ones that John Macoma is putting forward and John Tyson, all those guys, is super helpful. That it keeps on drawing us back to the main thing. Mm-hmm. And therefore it becomes a very, very helpful thing for us. And it becomes a door. It places, it's a door where God can get to us. It keeps on bringing us back and placing us before God. And all those things are super helpful and good. And in fact, I mean, you trace this right back to the beginning of Christianity. That's exactly what the Desert Fathers are all doing. They're all doing this kind of stuff. They realize that human beings need practices that they can continuously do, that keep them safe from things that will harm them and keeps them, coming back towards God. Great. Did a lot of the Desert Fathers and the things that spun out of that become legalism? Yes, it did. And I think there's always a danger for us to fall back into legalism too. But I think we need to find a way to walk the tension between those two things. Maybe I think it's super important. So I think that's where I would land with that. I wonder if this butts into something I've been thinking about too. I've been thinking a lot about wisdom. And what is wisdom? Why do we need it? And why are we lacking it? So I think those two things play together.
Go more into that. This can be a random podcast.
Yeah. It is a random, but maybe it'll dovetail at some point. Yeah. I've just been thinking a lot about wisdom, and we can have all these things, but if we don't know what to do with them, then we don't have wisdom. Because I think wisdom is very interested in particulars. It's interested in the practice of things. How do we go? How do we live in the world? What should we do in any given situation? But it's always always attuned to the universals. It's always attuned to, well, why would this matter in the first place? Why should we do this practice in the first place? And I just feel like sometimes we lack wisdom, and maybe that's the thing that we should be praying for at the moment. More wisdom. What should I do in this situation? What's the right thing to do here? Well, you know, those kind of things. Instead of like, I think a lot of people will pick up the practices as, oh, that's what you should be doing. But we should also be saying, well, why would we do these things?
Yeah, I think you're right, because that certainly was when we, on Friday with the capstone course that was, you know, leading with Maya, was, you know, we talked about tensions. The question is not, well, the tension is there, you know, well, we can choose to not if we don't. But if you're going to integrate, if you're going to try and engage the world and then faith, there's a tension. There's always a tension. There's 101 different tensions and plus.
Yep.
So then what's the thing about that tension and dynamism? Well, it's wisdom.
Yep.
How do I navigate that? You know, when you know, how do I play the strings, if you will? Because, you know, a musical instrument is tensioned.
Yep.
And how do I play the string? How do I get those notes working? So that as a metaphor. I wonder too is, you know, I keep coming back to that. We talk about doing.
Yeah.
But is it helpful for us to think about how we're making?
That's right. Yep.
Because it's slightly different. The do is sort of, there's the object, I do that.
Yep.
Making is I can still, it's the making is a much more, I don't know, I may sit between being and doing.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
we're always making ourselves.
Yeah.
How are we making ourselves is the question, isn't it?
Yep. I mean, it's a classic thing of like, look, okay, you've got a whole lot of knowledge about stuff, but do you know what to do with it? Do you know how it's going to be useful in any situation? Most people just have a whole lot of knowledge and just throw it out there, and it's not helpful. That's not wise. You don't know what to do. And I mean, the other thing is, classics are sex.
Yeah.
Anyone can have sex, but do you know what to do with it?
Yeah.
Do you know how to use it properly?
Yeah.
What's it for?
Yeah.
You know, when do you not do it? And when do you do it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the big things of our culture. Just do it all the time. Yeah, but it's not wise to do that.
Or you should do it here and you should do it
that's
not there, which is like, well, actually then that doesn't...
That's right.
Even with a marriage, it can be fatal.
100%. The other one is power. You know, any people with power, but do you know what to do with power? Do you know how to apply it? Do you know when you should hold back from it? You know, money is the other one. Okay, so you can get a whole lot of money, but would you know what to do with that money? Would you know how to spend it wisely? So all those kind of things. And I think then coming back to the practices, do you know what to do with those practices? Sure, you're doing them. But do you really know why you're doing them? How to apply them? So I think there's something about practices and wisdom that go together. And I think with all the things that we have and that we do, the thing that we should probably be praying for is, God, make me wise that I would know what to do with these. How will I make them helpful? Yeah. My
wife sent me a funny Instagram reel a few weeks ago where it's this lady, it's just captions and she's just staring up into the sky. And the caption is, I'm just waiting for God to test me with $10 million.
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's when you find out how wise you are.
I thought of a more one that, a wood one.
Yeah.
That, so here's a piece of wood. What you need to do is you need to plane it. Right. But it's not as simple as that. Do I just put the plane into it? No, I actually have to feel my way through this. Yep. I have to hold it. I have to, there's an action, there's a wisdom in the process. Yep. And there's a wisdom before and after, but actually there's a wisdom in the process, which is an embodied wisdom. Yep. And going, like if I push it this way, it's not working, it's going against the grain because it's twisting. Yep. How am I going to do this? I might have to turn it slightly. I might have to pull back the plane blade a little bit more. So there is the wisdom is not static. Yep, that's right. It's moving. It's right. Moving as we're going. Very much. What does that look like? Well, maybe it's relational. Yep. So there are others in the mix. We're asking.
Yep.
We're talking.
That's right.
There's a space between.
I think that's right. So I think I think that's right. And then I would say the wisdom of the practices. And this is why kind of different streams inside of Christianity sprung up, because people's characters are more drawn to one kind of practice than another. And so I think what legalism does is that it says there's one box that fits all people, and therefore all people, no matter what your character, must adhere to that way of practice. I think that's an unwise way to put practices out. I think you need to test them and find out which practices work best for you, and it won't become legalistic. It will become life-giving. And that's scary for some people, saying, well, you just got to tell people what to do.
No, you can't.
No, you don't. You've got to shepherd them to find the thing that fits their character, their way of life, their particular situation.
I gave you an
Not
example.
all of us are called to be monks in the desert.
No.
And that was never the case.
No.
I mean, the monks in the desert would say, only come here if you're called to it.
Yeah.
So
I have an example. So Paul had an issue. I forget which book of the Bible it was in, or one of his letters, but he had an issue with people eating the food that was sacrificed to idols.
Yep.
Classic example,
Right.
where it's where people were eating the food that was sacrificed to idols, and so some people who we consider to be weaker brothers and sisters considered that to be a form of idolatry still. Where these people are like, no, I'm just eating food sacrificed to nobody, right? So
Right.
it doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
what was Paul's solution? It was actually wisdom, to choose wisdom in the moment. He's like, I'm not going to tell you to not eat it or to eat it.
Yeah.
There's not a one size fits all here. But I'm going to tell you to probably not eat it if it really bothers this person over here. Because what the wisdom in that situation is, what matters most is that you guys live peaceably with each other.
Right.
That's the real purpose of this.
Yeah.
It's not whether you can eat, some beef
Yeah.
that was sacrificed at a particular idol or not.
Yeah,
I wonder whether helpful here is, because what is wise then becomes what does wisdom look like?
Yep.
And I think I wonder whether you start to introduce the notion of beauty here.
Right.
Will beauty, truth, and goodness play around, and they're playing in the mix here.
Yep.
But so the wisdom, is it the notion of beautiful? Does it bring delight?
Yep.
Does it bring a joy and a playfulness? Is there room for human freedom in this?
Yep.
All of those things. If it's cramping down, it's pressing it against, it's closing things down. Then is this wise? But that's not unrelated to the notion of beauty.
I think that's right. And and in a practical situation that looks like, what does the wise person look like? You come to a situation where no one really knows how to move forward. We have a lot of different ideas about things. And the wise person is the one who is able to take everything that's kind of fractured or like disparate and understand how to say, you know what, guys, we could put this together in such a way and move forward in maybe a different kind of way. And that's a beautiful situation because you've made something practical and good and true out of a very broken situation. I think that's what the wise person looks like. But they're not they're strange people, wise people, because they can move quickly through situations, knowing what to do and what not to do. They use a whole different range of skills.
And they've a lot of that knowledge, wisdom, was acquired through probably making a lot of the wrong decisions.
Maybe, yeah.
Not all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at other people's lives and you realize, I don't need to make that mistake. But honestly, a lot of the time, a lot of your own wisdom comes from your own mistakes that you made through the knowledge that you had and the unapplied knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember just like devouring church Christian leadership books, or even just like any popular level book. When I think it went from when I was like 19 to 25, I was just like consuming them, because I wasn't really a reader until I was 17 and graduated high school. And I had brought, you'll laugh at this, I had brought Rick Warren's Purpose Driven Life under my gown to the graduation, because there be about 450 people there. And I didn't pick this book because I wanted to read it.
Oh, okay.
I picked it because it was the only book out of all the books that I thought were interesting, and I thought it would have been bad if I brought like a Game Boy or something. That's the only reason why I brought a book to my graduation. So I had it under my gown in like the side of my pants, and then I brought it out and just read it. And I was like, holy crap. I was like, for me at 17, I was like, people write Christian stuff?
Right.
I was like, I didn't even know.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't know there was anything outside the Bible about like Christian.
really?
I had no
Wow.
clue.
Wow.
I was 17
Man.
and I had no clue. And I'm like, oh, and so it just opened up everything to me.
Wow.
But then I got into the opposite problem where I was reading so much
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I couldn't apply any of it
Yeah, that's a good point.
because it was just
Yeah.
pure knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I couldn't actually do the thing that the authors were asking me to do, which is
Yeah.
to apply it to my life or
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
apply wisdom
That's a
to
good
my
call.
life.
That's a good call.
So I found I came into that problem where I was just like, there's just too much knowledge for me to actually apply anything or
Yep.
think
Mhm.
wisely about things.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great call.
When you think about beauty, a beauty is the beauty of something is it's totally integrated. It's
Yeah.
totally whole.
Yep.
And so it has this attraction.
Yep.
It pulls us because
Yep.
it seems to be in harmony with itself. And I
That's
just thinking
right.
about this, so okay, Graeme, you've got to plane a piece of wood, you've got to get it down to this here. Well, you could put a plane into that and get it down to there.
Yep.
And go against the grain and rip it all up.
Yep.
It'll look beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
But to turn it and mold it and respond to it in a way that what do you call it, piece of wood is responding to you back
That's
and
right.
forth, and it comes down and it's a very smooth face edge.
That's right.
That's beautiful.
That's right.
So
Yep.
you can get there.
Yep.
Doesn't it? It may not look beautiful though.
That's
but
right.
where you want to get there is so it is beautiful.
Yep, that's right. And it all
Well, yeah.
it all sits together. There's a harmony about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a classic description of beauty. So it's where there's lots of different things that sit together
Yeah.
and create one whole
Yeah.
harmonious picture. For
Yeah.
us, that is a beautiful thing. But it also has something about it that shines through.
Yeah.
There's something about it that you can't say. You're like, wow, that it's
Yeah.
really captured me. There's
Yeah.
something about it that sits right with me. That's the beautiful. And the wise person is be able to take all these things of our lives and say, I know how to apply them. I know how to make them all sit together well, where one of them doesn't jut up over the other one. That's the wise person.
So
Yeah.
to the formation space, then the
Yeah.
wise person sees the what was the word you said around beauty? Not coherence.
Harmony?
Harmony.
Yeah.
Harmony in a situation where it's like, oh, that's beautiful. So when you look at, say, liturgical practices or spiritual disciplines or practices or formation and within this conversation, you would anticipate, you would hope that the wise person within that space would be able to say, ooh, that's a bit ugly.
Right.
Or,
yeah.
oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to articulate what that is because people can sense that when they see it and when they don't. Yeah. So here's a pivot.
Yeah.
We'll probably end soon anyway. We'll end on the half hour.
Yeah.
You want to say something
Oh
else?
no! Yeah, I just had some.
Go for it,
So I just
Jonathan.
had other
Yeah,
thoughts.
yeah, go for it.
I was just thinking. Yeah, I think those. Yeah, what am I thinking?
Couldn't do that over Zoom.
What am I
just saw
thinking?
that in your eyes. And I
Yeah,
was like,
that's right.
there we
That's
go.
why Zoom doesn't work, right? You got to be in the room.
Yeah.
You got to be in the room. I had something about planing wood, but it skipped my mind. I think you really, those practices. I think where they don't become wise is that you see that person, yes, that walks amongst us like a legalistic kind of person that is bringing kind of condemnation on
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
through the because they're the ones that do the practices.
Yeah.
That is an unwise way to do the practices. If you're doing the practices well, you should be someone who walks into a room and brings life. That is bringing harmony amongst people because of, you're using the practices wisely.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And-
I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, well, I started thinking about because I've watched the America's Cup.
Right.
Good job, New Zealand. 3 in a row.
Yeah, but one of the things is the artfulness of when you look going sort of. I don't peel right underneath it, but pretty similar boats. But what they're picking is the art of picking that wind and those shifts.
That's right.
And I wonder if that's quite a nice metaphor to think about with practices, that we're looking for. It's not the practice in itself, but the practices help us find the wind and move with it.
Yeah.
And that's the dynamic.
Yep.
Well, the wind is the spirit.
That's right.
So if you were to throw two things, like when I think of the arc of history over, short period of time, the charismatic renewal of the 1970s, I'd been brought up evangelical, conservative evangelical. My parents, it was a world of do's and don'ts.
Yep.
The charismatic renewal kind of casts the whole thing out is like it was spontaneous, and there was sort of an to its detriment actually. It became so sort of spontaneous. We don't need all that stuff, and so tradition becomes a bad word for Pentecostals and
right.
charismatics. The trouble is that we didn't really see that either.
Yeah.
That actually tradition holds us.
Yeah, that's
it keeps
right.
us.
Yep.
So we flew up that way. So what we've seen perhaps now, as you'll comment, we're sort of going back in the other direction.
Yep.
We've just rediscovered patrices again. Wow, this is cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Rediscover tradition.
Yeah, but so maybe
Yeah.
it's this sort of notion.
I think that's right. That's a
the
good
notion of and maybe that it captures something
think
of
that's
your church that you go to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, coming back to the wind,
Yeah.
capturing the wind. I mean, for 1,500 years, the church has understood that these particular practices catch the wind. So you should put yourself in those practices and those situations because they catch the wind well. And I think that's what John McComer and stuff is bringing back. Hey guys, we need to have these practices in order to catch the wind.
Yeah.
Do them. They're good. But they're not the only ones. Like, for example, I've just started like sketching again. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I do a sketch every day, like of whatever, my coffee cup, my breakfast or something like that. It's a practice that catches the wind for me because it slows you down. If that's the only practice you can do and you've found one that works for you, you should do that practice. Keep on catching the wind. Just get in front of the wind. However you will, but just be aware that Christianity has also all these other practices that have worked for people over the centuries that you could also pick up as well.
But also, if we want to continue with the boating and attacking, so
that's a good metaphor. See?
Yeah, there's a good metaphor. It opens things up.
Yeah.
And so when, like a boat, when it's going downwind, doesn't need to tack necessarily if it's going true straight down. But usually the wind's never like that. Usually the winds, if the course is, say, going from north to south, but the wind is northwest to southeast, so it's on an angle, you need to tack in and you need to tack out.
Right.
So that's the form. However, not all of the same mechanics or techniques for boating apply to every single race. Some matter more than others. It depends on which direction the wind's going. So I think what you've just identified and what you've just said is when it comes to practices, I think, not all practices will catch the wind for you.
Right. Yeah.
I've there's been moments where I honestly can't pick up and read my Bible.
Right.
Yep. I can't do it.
Yep.
All I can do is just sit there, lie down quiet on my back.
Yep.
And that's it. And that's what catches the wind. Other times I can't sit still for a second.
Yep.
I've got to go do something.
Yep.
And that's when walking and praying catches the wind,
Yep.
So you have all these different techniques, but it depends on which way the wind's going.
Yeah.
I
think that's right. And here's another thing to add that's probably countercultural to the climate at the moment. You know what? We're babes in this kind of stuff. We're novices, honestly. And I think the master can catch the wind with all those practices, and in fact disciplines themselves to catch the wind with those practices. Will do them even if they hate them. But that's the master. And they're not going to tell anyone about it because they're just going to do it. But we are novices at this stuff, man. Like compared to people of the past. And I think, and I welcome the practices that we would start to bring through mature Christians. Because I think we've probably been living as novices for way too long. And as Paul said, the milk is good. You should drink milk, but there's a time where we need to move on to harder food. And I do think there's a little bit of that going on.
I don't want to pivot now because I think what I'm about to say will open up a whole new conversation.
Maybe it'll be the conversation that we needed to talk about the whole time.
Maybe, you know what?
This could have just been knowing us, dude. That was just the warm up.
All right,
like
you want to go for it?
And everything
just
from
out.
now, everything from now on, you just cut off.
Just tap out if you're like, I don't want to go here.
Yeah.
Graeme knows what I'm going to say.
Okay. What a time.
Yeah, you might know either. I know as well. So, I think, and this is why it's such a big conversation. I don't think we can do it justice right now. I think it deserves its own conversation. I think within the evangelical mind, we are so obsessed with efficiency and output and efficient causality that we went from growing churches to growing people.
Right.
That the outcome, that what stayed the same and what is exactly the same is that we are still outcome driven. We are still focused on. We were focused on growing the church to make an impact in the world. Now we're focused on the individuals to make an impact in the world. Right. Some people would say, no, it's to love God. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. That is good. But if we had to really get down to it, I think most church leaders, including myself, are so pragmatically driven and so results driven. We also say, yeah, but for what purpose? Yeah. That we can actually feel. Yeah, yeah, that actually makes a difference. Yeah. And so I'm wondering, my ecclesiology is shaping honestly over the past even 2 months, where I've identified that within myself, where I think outcomes are important, they matter, what you aim for matters, but when it comes to the Christian life, sometimes the aim can actually be toxic. If the aim isn't properly directed. Right. And so I can't get to the logic necessarily at the moment because it would take too long. But my assumption is the aim shouldn't be on changing the world. The aim shouldn't be on growing people to be better Christians. The aim shouldn't be growing churches to be more noticeable in the world. The more I think about it, the aim should be to worship God. And the conversation that we had a while ago, Jonathan, where you went to that Greek Orthodox church, has still really sat with me. Where you said their entire framework is so different. Yeah. They don't care about being efficient. It's a 3-hour standing service. Yeah. They could care less about efficiency. They just care about worship. Yep. And I was like, that is so foreign to me. Yep. But I'm like,
it's so foreign.
Are they right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I think they are. I wouldn't want to still stand for 3 hours. I don't want to become Greek Orthodox. I'm not going to become Greek Orthodox. Yeah. However, I think that expression of that aim of to worship God manifested itself within that tradition in that way. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that it can't manifest itself in a different way, in a different tradition with the same aim. That's how, there's variability within people and within the church. But what are your thoughts on that? Contrasting the growing churches to growing people formation, really the same thing, about the output, and what about the aim?
Yeah.
I think, question. I mean, you and I have talked about that, and I think I have mentioned it before about, so that's some of my research stuff. Yeah. And I think I found it quite helpful to understand Aristotle's 4 causalities. Yep. And that in Western culture, because of our, well, it could be, there's an argument there is that print has attuned us in a certain way of linear way of thinking. Yep. We read words, one follows the other for an outcome at the end of the sentence. Maybe English even more. So object-subject plays. So we become fixated on a kind of linear way, linear metaphors play, so the mechanical metaphor. Yeah. I think that's deeply welded into the way in which we process stuff. Yeah. And so we're not happy to live with what I call, and the biggest one is the formal causality, because we live in an environment and we don't control that environment. Mm-hmm. So I would see the Sermon on the Mount, particularly that part, chapter 6, the prayer part. Jesus gives those metaphors, creation metaphors. Seek first his righteousness and the kingdom of God, these things be added unto you. I think it's dealing with a formal causality. Right. Because underneath this, all that's going on, and even in the world that we're living in, and it's not a happy place, just go to YouTube and look at it. It's horrible. But there is a sense for the Christian that underneath all that, the sovereignty of God holds this world together. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a form of causality. Yeah, right. And I don't think I think we're predisposed to a different way of being. Yep. We don't, and look, it's not to say if our efficient causality of cause and effect isn't helpful. It's extremely helpful. That's the problem. If I'm trying to make something, that's that linear process. Yeah. I'm doing this and this and this. Although, or working out an engineering thing, which I am at the moment.
We build bridges.
Yeah.
We
So-
save people's lives. All with
So-
the
so
aim
it's-
of efficient causality.
yeah.
you know?
So it is.
Yeah.
It's highly
Yeah.
attractive, and it
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's just not the world that we live in,
Yep.
because it doesn't make sense at that level.
Yeah.
Because a part of me is like, what's the place of the church in the world? Because when I think of a more big T tradition church, like Orthodox or Catholic, I see those places as like not escapes as in a bad way, but as like a retreat from the world that is life-giving. Where you go into a church building like that, and you know immediately, I'm in a different world. Like, I'm in a different world. There's no time here. I can't see a clock anywhere.
Yep.
All I see is Christ in stained glass or crucified all around in the annexes of the Catholic Church, or I can smell. It smells different here, and a part of me, and an evangelical critique of that would be like, oh, they're not doing enough. They're not doing anything out there. And now I'm like, what they're actually doing is they're shining a light, an alternative way to view reality.
Yeah.
What they're not saying, simultaneously those traditions aren't saying, escape the world entirely and just stay here for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Yes, you have to go into the world and do the things that are required of you in the world.
Yep.
But you need to come here
Yep.
because you can only see you're seeing with like a smoke screen in front of you.
Yeah.
And when you come in here, you really see what's going on.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
with that, what you really see, what's really going on is worship. We aren't worshiping for a particular outcome or for a particular cause. We're just worshiping because that's who we are, and that's what God deserves.
Yeah.
And not just worshiping in song, worshiping in life and all that stuff. Where I wonder, like, the efficient causalityification of church has actually detached that sense of escape and restoration that the church maybe used to be,
Yeah.
where you would go from out there in the neighborhood, in the world, and then on Sundays you would go to church, or in the middle of the week, randomly during your lunch break, you would walk into a church to pray or something, and you would feel a retreat. Where now you walk into a space like that, if it's a efficient causality type church that's all about that, nothing else, it's not a retreat.
Yeah.
It's just more labor on your back.
Yep.
There's nowhere to rest. There's nowhere to pray.
Yep.
And because you just feel like you're still in the same wheel.
Yep.
That's
I think
happening
that's
out
right.
there. You're a rat on the wheel,
Yeah.
racing around. Where the actual like those different types of churches, they actually understand something profoundly different about the world.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. And it's refreshing to walk in those places.
Yep, that's right.
Very, like, you walk in, especially if you have Christian theology and background and you know Jesus, and you walk into a space like that, you're like, whew,
Yeah,
you can just
exactly.
exhale.
I mean, it's really
Yeah.
interesting because
Exactly.
I like there's a whole tension there. You walk in there, and time changes.
Yeah.
But there's a
Time
tension. There's a tension between.
It doesn't exist. Sometimes.
So there's
Yeah.
a tension though, because you will, if you walk into that space, so you got kids, you got wife, you went
Yep.
by yourself,
Yep.
you're looking at your watch.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there's a world out there
Yep.
that is finite and time governing that you have to be a part of it.
Yep.
So you're coming into,
That's
so there's
right.
a tension
That's
there,
right
isn't there?
too.
There's a tension in there.
Exactly.
Like, I
yeah,
remember.
I think that's right.
Just
There's a tension.
one small story, and I know you got some
Yeah.
thoughts too. When I was in grade 9, so I was 14, I think, we did a trip from Halifax as a grade 9 class to Montreal into Quebec City. And, about a day, like a full day bus ride up, stayed there for a few days, had some fun, but we walked into a large Catholic cathedral. Quebec is very a-religious now. But it had a very dominant Catholic presence, even until like the 1970s. And then something happened where it just went off a cliff from the 1970s, 1980s. And people are like, well, no one's Christian in Quebec anymore for some reason. Everyone's secular or atheist or something, or agnostic. But I remember even as a 14-year-old, I had been a Christian for maybe 2 or 3 years at that point. And I walk into the space, and it just like, I was floored.
Yeah.
I was like everybody knew, even if you weren't Christian, that this is very different.
Yeah.
We've walked into a different portal in time, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
There were candles in the distance
Yeah.
that you lit.
Mm-hmm.
What was fascinating was there were crutches up this, like, physical crutches up this massive like 3-story pole, like scaffolding,
Yep.
wooden scaffolding, and they were placed in like almost like an art exhibit,
Right.
like hundreds of them, and basically all these people who were healed.
Oh, whoa.
And it was crazy. And I'm just like, I'm walking into this place. I'm like, I've gone to another world.
Wow.
I'm in like a C.S. Lewis, like Narnia type experience.
Wow.
And I remember walking away, and then we went to Six Flags, and I was like, all right, that was that.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah.
but for a moment, I'm like, even at 14, I was like, there's something, like I felt like I should just sit down and pray.
Yeah.
Like that was the most natural response in a space like that.
Yeah.
Not just because of the television shows I had watched in the past, just because it just felt like you're drawn to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, what you're gonna say?
No, I think that's awesome. Yeah, man, I just don't have any answers other
No,
than
you don't need answers.
Other than I think it's worth us just thinking about what lens we view the world through, and I think the lens for us, and this is very orthodox, and this is why the Orthodox Church looks like it does. So in evangelical circles, we put the cross in the middle of everything, right? We're Christiform people, right? You've heard, we all hear that said all the time. The cross is everything. And the cross, of course, is massive. For the Orthodox, resurrection is everything. Mm-hmm. It is the center. It overtakes the cross at the center of what the Christian life should be about. Because with the resurrection, everything's changed. The rules are completely different. Nothing stays the same. Everything else is dying because Christ has brought new life into the world, and it floods into the world now. So we don't need to be anxious people. We don't need to be people of death anymore. Christ has overcome the world, and he has overcome death. Therefore, everything we do must look like resurrection life. All the systems that we thought gave us life need to be rethought. We need to start living and changing the world and living into the world as people that have been resurrected. The tension is that, of course, we are dying, but we know that that's okay because we're going to live. So, and I think we live out of systems, and I think the evangelical church has lived out of systems for a long, long time that are they're old school, man. They're the systems of the world. I wonder what it would look like if we said, we're just going to change it up completely as resurrected people. What brings life? What kind of system now would bring life? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that, but I think it's worth us thinking through those.
For sure. But
Yeah.
even within that grand picture you just painted, the Russian Orthodox Church is intensely compromised.
100%.
You know? So
and this is the tension, right?
that's the tension. Intensely compromised through kind of co-signing what
Definitely.
Moscow is doing.
Definitely.
You know? And not speaking truth to power.
That's right.
So it's like
Yeah.
we live in a complicated world.
Mhm.
Yeah. And we're compromised too in different ways as well.
We all
We
100%
all
are.
Yeah.
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 So, I guess wisdom comes back to wisdom.
Yeah.
We need to be
I might
asking for
go
wisdom.
back to James again. I had that text. We didn't really look at his student body on Friday,
Yeah.
but it was sitting in I wrote out something and I threw that in there to say, well, what is wisdom? And James, was it James 3?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wisdom from above and wisdom from below and
Yeah.
wisdom from above. And it's interesting because I think the wisdom there, it's not easy to see what defines the difference is a posture,
Yeah, that's right.
because it's ambition.
Yep.
Well, that's a posture, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And other envy. Well, envy is a posture, but it was just sort of these two, because he's playing with a duality there. There's
Yep.
wisdom from above and there's wisdom from below.
Mhm.
So he's encouraged to wisdom.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back and have a little look
I
at that.
reckon
and
that's
think about-
right.
have a think about that.
Do you know part of it? I think this new resurrection.
us off.
Yeah, can I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
resurrection life is actually coming back to this conversation that we are in here.
Mm.
I mean, I think we have to remember that we're deeply compromised people, and we're dying, and the systems that we have lived on are dying. And if we want to be resurrection people, we need to come back and listen to each other, because we do not have the answer
No.
alone. And Christ, as Spirit works, is working through us, and this is the discernment moment. So we slow everything down. That we stop saying, oh, we know what to do. You don't know what to do. You think you know what things are. You do not know, because what does a resurrection look like? If you think you know, you're in deep trouble. You need to come and discern it and listen with people and know that you're a sinful, broken person that needs others to help you live into the resurrection life.